Tonight, the Supreme Court has delivered a landmark ruling that will reshape American economic policy and send shockwaves through the nation's political landscape. The decision, announced just hours ago, is already being called one of the most consequential in decades, with the potential to alter the way the United States engages with the global economy for years to come. At the heart of the matter is the balance of power in Washington. For generations, the question of who controls America's economic destiny has been fiercely debated. Tonight, that debate has reached a turning point. This decision halts the aggressive unilateral tariff strategy that defined recent years, curbing the president's ability to impose tariffs without congressional approval. No longer can sweeping economic measures be enacted with the stroke of a pen. Instead, the legislative branch must now play a central role in shaping trade policy. For years, tariffs were used as both shield and sword, defending American industries but also sparking trade wars and raising prices for consumers. Manufacturers, farmers, and everyday Americans have felt the impact, from the cost of raw materials to the price of food on the shelves. Now the court has redefined who holds the power to tax and regulate commerce: Congress, not the president. This shift restores a constitutional balance, reinforcing the idea that such sweeping decisions require the voice and vote of the people's representatives. The world is watching as markets react and global leaders reassess their strategies. Investors are bracing for volatility, while America's trading partners weigh the implications for their own economies and diplomatic ties. Supporters of the old strategy call this judicial overreach, warning of lost flexibility in a fast-changing world. Opponents hail it as a victory for the rule of law and a necessary check on executive power. The implications are vast, touching everything from the price of goods in your local store to America's alliances abroad. Trade, jobs, and the cost of living all hang in the balance as the nation adapts to this new reality. Tonight we break down what this historic decision means for you, the country, and the world. As the dust settles, one thing is clear: the story of America's economic future is being rewritten before our eyes. A tariff is essentially a tax placed on goods that are brought into a country from abroad. When a product crosses a border, the government can impose this extra charge, which is then added to the cost of the item. Tariffs have been used for centuries as a tool of economic policy, shaping the way nations trade with each other. The main idea behind tariffs is to make imported goods more expensive, so that consumers are more likely to choose products made within their own country. This is often described as buying American, but the same logic applies in countries all over the world. Governments use tariffs for several reasons. They can protect domestic industries from foreign competition, help new industries grow, or simply generate revenue for the state. Sometimes tariffs are used to support jobs in key sectors like steel, agriculture, or technology. Tariffs can also be a bargaining chip in international relations, giving governments leverage in trade negotiations or as a response to unfair practices by other countries. However, tariffs can have unintended consequences. When one country imposes tariffs, others often retaliate with their own, leading to trade wars. These conflicts can disrupt global supply chains, cause shortages, and hurt exporters who rely on foreign markets. Ultimately, it's everyday consumers who feel the impact. As companies face higher costs for imported materials or products, they often pass those costs down the line, resulting in higher prices at the store and tighter household budgets. Even domestic producers, now shielded from foreign competition, may take advantage of the situation by raising their own prices, knowing that consumers have fewer alternatives. The debate over tariffs is fierce. Are they a necessary shield for local jobs and industries, or do they simply make life more expensive and risk international conflict? Economists, politicians, and citizens all have strong opinions. History shows that while tariffs can protect certain jobs and industries in the short term, they often come at a broader economic cost, such as higher prices and reduced competitiveness. Sometimes entire communities suffer when trade wars escalate, leading to layoffs, business closures, and economic downturns. The real question is whether the government should step in to protect specific industries, or focus on policies that keep prices low and encourage global cooperation. In a world where economies are deeply connected, the choice isn't always clear-cut. Lower prices and open markets can benefit many, but some industries may struggle to survive without protection. Tariffs are a powerful tool in the government's arsenal, but they come with significant risks and trade-offs that must be carefully weighed. The effects of tariffs ripple through every household, every business, and every international negotiation, shaping the way we live, work, and trade. That's why decisions about tariffs, even those made by the Supreme Court, matter so much for the future of the economy and for all of us. The tariff debate is as old as America itself. Alexander Hamilton championed tariffs to protect young industries and fund the government. For over a century, high tariffs divided North and South, fueling economic tensions that contributed to the Civil War. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930, meant to protect jobs, instead triggered global trade collapse and deepened the Great Depression. After World War II, the U.S. led the world toward free trade, believing open markets brought prosperity and peace. This consensus held for decades, with both parties supporting lower tariffs and stable trade rules. But in the 21st century, rising economic anxiety and political shifts set the stage for a dramatic reversal. That conflict would soon land at the Supreme Court. Donald Trump's 2016 election marked a sharp break from decades of free trade. He used tariffs as a weapon, bypassing Congress by invoking national security laws to impose taxes on steel, aluminum, and hundreds of billions in Chinese goods. This approach was confrontational and unpredictable, often announced on social media, and justified by a broad interpretation of national security. Critics argued this was economic protectionism in disguise, and that the president was wielding unchecked power. The courts were soon asked, can the president wage a trade war alone? The answer would have consequences far beyond economics. The stage was set for a constitutional showdown. The legal battle began when a coalition of steel importers facing steep new tariffs decided to take their fight to the courts. They argued that Congress, not the president, holds the constitutional authority to impose taxes and regulate international trade. This lawsuit was not just about steel, it was about the very foundation of how America's trade laws are made and enforced. The importers claimed that the 1962 law, known as Section 232, which the president used to justify the tariffs, was dangerously vague. In their view, it handed the president a blank check to restrict imports under the broad and often ambiguous banner of national security. They warned that such unchecked power could be abused, setting a precedent for future presidents to bypass Congress whenever they saw fit. The government, however, pushed back hard. Their attorneys pointed to decades of Supreme Court rulings that had granted the executive branch significant leeway in matters of national security and foreign affairs. They argued that the president must have the flexibility to act swiftly to protect the nation's interests, especially in a rapidly changing global landscape. Lower courts ultimately sided with the government, citing established precedent. They concluded that Congress had not overstepped its bounds by delegating this authority, and that the law provided enough guidance to the president. But the stakes were enormous. Should one person, even the president, have the power to single-handedly shape America's trade policy? The case raised fundamental questions about the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. The Supreme Court was asked to revisit decades-old precedent and decide if Congress had, perhaps unintentionally, given away too much of its own power. The justices faced a difficult choice: uphold the status quo, or redraw the boundaries between the legislative and executive branches. The world of international trade held its breath. Investors, manufacturers, and foreign governments all watched closely, knowing that the outcome could ripple across global markets and reshape alliances. The central question was clear: were these tariffs a legal exercise of presidential power, or an unconstitutional power grab that threatened the balance of American democracy? The answer would not only impact the steel industry, but also reshape the balance of power in Washington, setting a precedent for future conflicts between Congress and the president. The case reached the highest court in the land, carrying global implications and the potential to redefine how America governs its trade relationships. The verdict would change everything, sending shockwaves through the legal, political, and economic landscape of the United States and beyond. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court sided with the steel importers, ruling that Congress cannot delegate its core power to tax and regulate commerce so broadly. The court didn't strike down the law entirely, but sharply limited its use. Future tariffs for national security must be tied to a clear, direct threat. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "The power to tax and regulate foreign commerce belongs to Congress, not the executive." The majority called this a necessary correction, restoring the constitutional balance. Justice Gorsuch added, "A government of laws, not of men, requires rules written by Congress, not executive decree." In dissent, Justice Alito warned the court was undermining the president's ability to respond to threats, but the majority's view now stands: Congress must reclaim its responsibility. The impact will be immediate and profound. The ruling will ripple through the economy, starting with your wallet. Tariffs raised prices for consumers. Now, many imported goods should get cheaper. Businesses that rely on imports will see costs fall, potentially lowering prices and boosting competitiveness. Domestic industries once protected by tariffs face new competition and possible job losses. The decision brings stability, ending years of unpredictable trade policy and giving businesses confidence to invest. International trade is likely to rebound, helping farmers and exporters hurt by past retaliatory tariffs. The global economy may return to a more integrated rules-based system, but the political and economic aftershocks will take time to settle. Dr. Jennifer Hillman, trade expert, calls this ruling a landmark check on executive power. For decades, Congress handed trade authority to the president. Now, the court says it's time to take it back. The decision isn't about whether tariffs are good or bad, it's about who decides. Trade policy will now be debated in Congress with public hearings and input from all sides. The ruling reassures allies and signals a return to predictable, rules-based trade. But the fight shifts to Congress, where lobbying and partisanship could complicate progress. The challenge: can Congress handle this responsibility, or will gridlock return power to the executive? The court has opened the door. Now Congress must walk through it. America's approach to trade and its global reputation hangs in the balance. The next chapter will be written in the halls of Congress. The Supreme Court's decision ends the era of presidentially driven trade wars and returns power to Congress. The transition will be turbulent as lawmakers debate the future of American trade policy. The choices made now will shape prices, jobs, and America's role in the world. For the public, this is a kitchen table issue. Your voice matters more than ever. The story isn't over, it's just beginning. The world is watching as America redefines its place in the global economy. Will this lead to prosperity or new political battles? The answer depends on what happens next, in Congress, in business, and in every American home.